Welcome to Carl Jung Insights. Has he ever glanced at you when he thought you weren't paying attention? Has his tone shifted, just slightly, the moment he starts talking to you and only you? Here's something worth sitting with. The unconscious mind doesn't know how to lie. A man might choose his words carefully, guard himself, hesitate, but underneath all that caution, his deeper self may have already settled on an answer. And that answer might be you. What if the man who leaves you puzzled with his contradictions, warm one moment, distant the next, is actually far more attached to you than he consciously realizes? Carl Jung spent years exploring how our truest feelings slip past the logical, guarded part of the mind and show up instead in small, involuntary behaviors. When something in a man recognizes something in you on that level, his actions start giving away what his words haven't caught up to yet. So many women read silence as a lack of interest. But sometimes it's the opposite. Real love, the kind that actually means something, rarely needs fireworks or grand declarations to prove itself. Instead, it works quietly in the background, reshaping how a person moves through their own life, often before either of you fully understands what's happening. Today, we're going to walk through the clearest signs that a man's inner self has already chosen you, even while his conscious mind is still catching up. The confusion, the sudden warmth followed by odd distance, the mixed signals, none of that necessarily means disinterest. Jung had a saying that fits perfectly here. Whatever we don't bring into conscious awareness ends up steering our lives anyway, like an unspoken fate. Love works exactly the same way. If he hasn't yet put a name to what he's feeling, his deeper self is already acting on it regardless. Before we get into it, I'd love for you to drop the word resonance in the comments. Not for me, for yourself. There's something powerful about naming a feeling that echoes inside you. It's like giving your own intuition permission to acknowledge what it already senses. If any part of this is striking a chord, if you feel a flicker of recognition, type resonance and let that be your signal to yourself. Now, how do you actually spot real love in a man? The kind buried in his unconscious, felt in his heart, but not yet spoken aloud. This isn't going to be a shallow rundown of texting habits or tired romantic cliches. We're going deeper into what Jung referred to as the soul's own language. The quiet ways a man reveals himself when something inside him stirs every time you're around, even if he can't fully explain it himself. Pay close attention here, because the common mistake is waiting around for a confession, a promise, some big romantic moment. And in doing that, we overlook the thing that actually matters. How a person's inner world quietly rearranges itself around you. Jung believed real love was never something we consciously pick out or plan for. It arrives almost against our will, breaking down the walls we've built and pulling us toward the most honest version of ourselves. So tune into your intuition and watch closely. If a man shows even one of these behaviors, if you've caught him reacting this way even once, it likely means he's genuinely moved by you, probably more deeply than his rational mind is willing to admit just yet. We'll go through these one at a time, starting subtle and building toward the unmistakable. This isn't only about figuring out whether he loves you, it's about understanding what real love looks like when it takes hold of someone. When a man is genuinely affected by a woman's presence in a way that changes him, even without the words to explain it, his behavior starts shifting in ways he can't fully control. The first sign shows up in his attention. Not the performative kind that's angling for something back, something quieter, more sincere. He starts picking up on things other people miss. He notices when you say you're fine but clearly aren't. He clocks a new haircut you never mentioned. He hears something different in your voice before you've said a word about it. This kind of noticing doesn't come from trying to impress you. It comes from an actual emotional connection. Jung's idea was that authentic feelings naturally project outward so they can be understood, even without conscious intention. A man like this isn't running a strategy. He's reacting from somewhere real inside him. He doesn't need daily contact to keep you on his mind. You might notice him bringing you up out of nowhere, circling back to something you never finished talking about, or reaching out with no obvious reason at all. That's not routine. That's his unconscious mind pulling him toward you, working through something it hasn't quite named yet, but can't ignore either. This isn't neediness or fixation, it's emotional resonance. Your presence has touched something in him, and it's starting to express itself, even wordlessly. Another telling sign is how differently he behaves specifically around you. Plenty of men present the same face to everyone, but a man who's genuinely falling for someone, even unknowingly, often becomes a different version of himself with that one person. More open, a little more vulnerable, occasionally even a bit awkward. Real love doesn't make a person look polished. It strips away the performance and leaves something rawer and more human underneath. If his guard only drops around you, if the silences between you feel comfortable instead of tense, you're seeing something well beyond casual interest. There's more to it, though. Jung believed that whatever the soul truly loves, it instinctively protects. So this same man might start worrying about you in ways that don't fully make logical sense, making sure you're not cold, that you got home safely, that you've actually eaten. It's not about control or trying to look responsible. It's that something in him has quietly taken on your well-being as his own concern, almost as though his own sense of balance is now tied to yours. And when a man starts showing up for you like that, steady, quiet, expecting nothing back, it usually means you've already become part of his inner world, whether or not he's said it out loud, whether or not he's even aware of it himself. His deeper self is already bound to yours in a way that goes beyond logic or explanation. So if any of this feels familiar, don't brush it off just because he hasn't said the words. What's happening beneath the surface is often much bigger than what shows up on the outside. Stick around, because the signs coming up next go even deeper, the kind that only genuine connection can bring into the light. Sometimes a man doesn't need to say a single word for his energy to reveal everything. His presence alone does the talking. Maybe he hasn't confessed anything, hasn't made plans or promises, but there's something unmistakable in the way he looks at you, in how his breathing shifts slightly when you get close, in the way he can sit beside you in silence without needing to fill it with small talk. That silence isn't empty. It's full presence. His inner self meeting yours without static or interference. Because when a man feels more for you than he's ready to say out loud, his body tends to say it for him. Watch what happens when your name comes up around him. If someone compliments you in a group setting, watch his eyes. If someone criticizes you, notice how his expression changes without him meaning it to. Love doesn't need to be fully understood to start protecting what it cares about. A man's instincts can kick in long before his conscious mind catches up. Jung pointed out that the unconscious operates on its own logic, and more often than we realize, we're steered by feelings we haven't yet found words for. So, if a man's expression changes the second your name comes up in conversation, even something as small as a flicker in his eyes, it's because part of him has already recognized that you matter more than he's consciously admitted. Another dead giveaway is effort. When someone's feelings are real, they show up in action, and it doesn't need to be dramatic. It's in how closely he listens, in the fact that he remembers something you mentioned weeks ago, seemingly in passing, in how he rearranges his schedule to make room for you, even in the way he apologizes when he feels he's let you down. That quiet, consistent effort says more than any speech could. Someone unaffected doesn't bother making space, but someone who feels something, even without fully understanding it, naturally starts reorganizing their life around you, not out of obligation, not to score points, but because it's happening on its own. Here's something most people completely miss. A man who's genuinely affected by you starts changing even when you're nowhere near him. His usual routines get disrupted. His thoughts wander more than they used to. He might come across as distracted, more introspective, a little restless. Something has been triggered in him, and even if he can't explain why, you've settled into his mind and his emotional landscape in a way that used to feel automatic and now doesn't. Jung talked about how certain inner figures can reshape a person entirely without any physical closeness at all. And somewhere along the way, without either of you planning it, you became exactly that kind of figure in his inner life. Even if he never says it, even if he'd deny it outright, you're already there, embedded in how his mind works. This is exactly why surface-level behavior can be so misleading. A lot of men go quiet about their feelings, not because they're empty of emotion, but because translating something as complex as the soul's language into actual words is genuinely hard for them. If you look closely enough, you can catch what he himself hasn't consciously worked out yet, that some part of him has already decided to stay. And there's more to uncover here, more signs of this quiet but powerful kind of love. Once you see the whole pattern, it might completely reshape how you think about love going forward. There's a kind of internal shift that happens in a man who's falling for someone, and it's rarely obvious at first. It builds slowly, almost invisibly, but it runs deep. You'll notice it when he starts dropping habits that used to define him. Maybe he used to dodge commitment entirely. Maybe he kept people at arm's length as a rule. Or maybe he just lived comfortably wrapped up in his own world. But something has been shifting since you entered the picture. He can no longer operate purely on self-interest. He starts making mental and emotional room he wasn't previously willing to give anyone. And it doesn't feel like sacrifice to him. It happens almost without his permission, as though something in him is quietly recalibrating to fit a new reality he didn't see coming. Pay attention to whether he's begun sharing pieces of himself that he keeps hidden from everyone else. Not surface-level facts, but the real stuff, his fears, his regrets, the things he actually dreams about. When a man feels that kind of connection to you, he starts showing his unfiltered self. Not because he's trying to look perfect, but because he's learning to trust in a way that might be new territory for him entirely. At this point, it stops being about pursuit or charm. It becomes surrender. And that surrender, quiet as it might look from the outside, is one of the strongest signs that something real has shifted in him. Jung said the soul needs something to reflect itself back in order to understand itself. And through your presence, you've become that reflection for him. In seeing you, he's starting to see himself differently too. There's one more detail people often overlook: how he responds to your emotional state. Not everyone knows how to sit with someone else's feelings, but a man who's truly invested in you starts feeling pulled into your emotional world almost involuntarily. Your happiness makes him smile. Your sadness unsettles him, even if he can't articulate why. He might not have the perfect words, but his own energy shifts to match yours. He may not ask, "Are you okay?" every single time, but you'll catch it in the way he watches you, the way his voice drops a little softer, the way he moves closer without quite knowing what to do, but clearly wanting to help anyway. That instinct to be near you in your emotional moments, even without a clear plan, is one of the most honest signs of love that hasn't yet been named out loud. Maybe the most telling sign of all shows up in his behavior when you're not there. Notice what he does in your absence. Does your name come up on its own in unrelated conversations? Does he hold on to things to tell you later? Are you the first person that comes to mind when something happens, even with no one around to prompt that thought? If you're still occupying space in his mind and emotions without needing to be physically present, that's a strong signal. Because what stays with someone in your absence usually says more than what they express when you're standing right in front of them. That's not random. That's his inner world speaking for itself. None of this is about guessing at someone's feelings. It's about learning to read past the surface with more than just logic. Real love often doesn't come announced with words or certainty. It shows up in the small signs one soul sends out when it starts to recognize another. Stick with this, because what comes next shows what happens when that kind of love becomes too strong to keep hidden. There's a point where a man, without quite realizing it, starts needing your presence, not out of habit, but because you've become something steadying for him. He might never phrase it romantically or rehearse a speech about it, but something in his energy noticeably shifts whenever there's distance between you. He might not say it outright, but you'll notice it in the way he gets restless when he hasn't heard from you, in how he reappears right when you're starting to give up on hearing from him, in how almost any excuse feels good enough if it brings him back into your world, even briefly. That's not obsession, and it's not dependency. It's a genuine connection running so deep that even he can't fully explain why you're constantly on his mind. And according to Jung, that actually tracks perfectly, because the unconscious doesn't operate on logic or timelines. Once something real takes root there, it starts shaping his thoughts, his impulses, even his decisions. One of the clearest ways this shows up is in how much weight he starts giving your opinion, even about things that have nothing to do with you directly. He might start talking through his future plans and asking what you think, not to win you over, but because he actually wants to know whether it lines up with how you see things. Not strategy, just the quiet reality that you've become someone whose perspective he trusts. He might even start opening up about the things he's genuinely unsure of, the insecurities he doesn't usually admit to anyone, not because he views you as a stand-in therapist or can't handle his own emotions, but because on some level, he's recognized you as a genuinely safe space, someone he doesn't need to perform for, someone he can be entirely himself around. Once a man reaches that kind of emotional openness with you, the usual walls stop mattering. Love was never really about certainty in the first place. It's built on being able to show vulnerability without fear of it being used against you. That trust, even given unconsciously, is one of the clearest expressions of love that actually runs deep. What really seals it, though, is when he starts picturing his future with you in it, without you ever bringing it up first. You'll catch it in offhand comments about the future, something like, "I'd love to visit this place someday." And somehow, in that mental picture, you're already there. He might not spell it out, but the hints are there. Those small, unplanned comments and passing mental images are windows into his unconscious. In his mind, you're not just passing through, you're becoming a fixed part of the life he imagines for himself. And you don't need to push him for clarity or force the conversation. Because when love is genuine, it reveals itself through the simplest, most unforced gestures. If his energy, his actions, and his attention keep drifting toward you naturally, then something real is happening here, whether or not he's fully grasped it yet, whether or not he's worked up the nerve to say it out loud. Once something has settled in at that level, everything else really is just a matter of timing. And in that waiting period, you can often see with more clarity than his conscious mind is currently allowing him to admit. Stick around, because there's still more worth uncovering. When a man starts treating you like something he genuinely doesn't want to lose, the whole dynamic between you starts to shift. And it's not a shallow change. It's not just more affection or more frequent check-ins. It's something structural, a quiet reorganizing of his world around the fact that you're in it. Because once a feeling becomes real, the other person isn't just part of the background anymore. They become essential. You'll notice this in how he starts prioritizing you, even without ever saying so directly. His day might be packed, chaotic, pulled in 10 directions, and he still shows up. Not out of obligation, but because he genuinely doesn't want to miss the chance to be there. Being around you, even in complete silence, gives him something like peace. And peace is one of the most overlooked parts of real love, even though it might be one of the most important ones. Love isn't only about excitement or that early rush of butterflies. The deeper kind, the kind Jung studied as a genuinely transformative force, also shows up as calm. The specific kind of calm that comes from being with someone who doesn't require you to change in order to be accepted. Once he feels that sense of ease with you, once he realizes he can drop his guard and still be wanted exactly as he is, you start to represent something like home to him. Not a literal address, but an emotional landing place. And once that happens, something subtle starts occurring that most people don't even register right away. He starts aligning himself with you without anyone asking him to. He might start genuinely enjoying things you enjoy. He gets curious about what you care about, what excites you, what makes you feel alive. He's not losing his own identity in the process. He's just discovering how good it feels to share what used to belong only to him. None of this happens by accident. Jung's framework suggests that when two people's inner worlds start resonating with each other, the boundaries between them naturally soften, and that softening is exactly where genuine intimacy begins. It's not just chemistry, it's a quiet, wordless sense of belonging. Also worth noticing is how he speaks about you when you're not there to hear it. You might never witness it directly, but in offhand conversations, in moments where your name comes up unexpectedly, he takes your side. Not to gain anything from it, but because on some level, defending you feels like protecting something he's already started to care about deeply. Love doesn't always need to be loud. Sometimes it just quietly does the work. Sometimes it expresses itself through small actions no one else ever notices. And that quiet, protective kind of love, the one that stands up for you even when you're not around to see it, tends to be the strongest kind there is. So if you're noticing this, if his routines are shifting without him even clocking it, if he's looking out for you in ways you weren't meant to see, if you're on his mind before he makes decisions that matter, don't brush it off. What you're looking at is an emotional truth that even he might not have fully worked out for himself yet. And it's exactly in that space, the part of us untouched by fear, overthinking, or old wounds, where the most genuine version of love actually forms. Keep going with me, because we're about to reach the deepest layer of a love that's becoming too real to keep hidden. And when everything finally clicks into place, when you look back and realize how much this man has changed without even registering it himself, when his actions and silences and smallest habits start speaking louder than any words ever could, that's the moment the real truth becomes clear. Genuine love doesn't always need drama to prove itself. It doesn't need fireworks or a perfectly worded confession. Sometimes it just shows up as quiet consistency, unspoken care, and a kind of tenderness that was never meant to be witnessed by anyone else. When a man cares about you more than he's consciously ready to admit, part of him has already made the decision his rational mind is only just beginning to catch up to. Jung's whole point was that the unconscious mind doesn't lie to us, that there's a layer of truth inside all of us that comes through in symbols, feelings, and behaviors we don't always understand in the moment, but that are completely real all the same. If you're recognizing these patterns, if you felt this connection yourself, if some part of you already senses that what's unfolding between you two isn't just coincidence, trust that instinct. What often gets mistaken for doubt is usually just the logical mind trying to keep up with something the deeper self already understands. In the end, what actually matters isn't some perfectly delivered declaration of love. It's the genuine resonance of someone's inner self quietly gravitating toward yours. The real signs don't show up as grand statements. They live in the quiet reshuffling of someone's priorities, in the pull that keeps bringing him back into your orbit, even when there's no logical reason for it. Jung understood that our most meaningful connections happen beneath conscious awareness, coming from that untouched, unguarded part of ourselves that exists outside fear or calculated strategy. When a man restructures his inner life to make room for you, when his energy shifts both with you and without you, when he hands you his vulnerability with no defenses up, That's love speaking before language even catches up. Recognition happening at the deepest level of who he is. And if you've made it this far, if you haven't clicked away, it's probably because somewhere inside you, this message landed. Not because of dramatic language or empty promises, but because of that quiet certainty that says, yes, this is real. Genuine love doesn't push. It doesn't demand attention or applause. It simply stays. It becomes something steady, something you can count on, and even in the quietest moments, its presence is unmistakable. It's a kind of force that doesn't try to convince you of anything. It just settles around you before you even notice it happening. That's when you understand that real love isn't only a feeling. It's its own language, one that doesn't rely on words at all. You see it in the small, easy-to-miss moments. In the extra second he lingers watching you when he thinks you're not looking. In how he remembers something you were sure he'd forgotten. In the way his eyes shift the instant you walk into a room. What might seem like nothing to anyone else becomes something that echoes deeply within you. Real love was never about perfection. There will be doubts, silences, distance. But what's genuine doesn't break at the first storm. Jung called this individuation, the path to becoming yourself, and said we sometimes meet people we connect with beyond logic, not to complete each other, but to walk together. A man who feels more than he admits may struggle for words, wrestle with fears that aren't about you, yet still he stays. He's not asking you to fix him, he wants you beside him. The calm he feels with you is trust, and we only drop our guard around what feels safe. When he pulls back, something still pulls him back to you. That's the soul settling before the mind catches up. This can't be forced, only recognized. So if you see him changing quietly, don't doubt it. He may not say it yet, but something in him has already chosen you. Real love doesn't rush. It simply becomes certain.